Hello, my name is Nicolas Arbelaez. This video is because I failed science the last bimester and this is my recovery. My recovery is about electrophoresis, that is a technique, and I will talk about the four styles of making electrophoresis that are the RGE, rotating held electrophoresis. The other one is the FIG, pulse field held electrophoresis. The third one is the TAFE, that is transverse alternating field electrophoresis. And the last one, that is the PAGE, that is a polyacrylamide held electrophoresis. Okay, as we know, the electrophoresis is the movement of molecules, can be DNA, RNA, and they are moved in electrophoresis by an electric current. And as we know, in electrophoresis, the nucleic acid goes from a negative pole to a positive pole. Okay, the electrophoresis is used to separate molecules by size or charge. For example, the DNA is separated with electricity and can be like fragments of DNA bigger than the others. Okay, the electrophoresis was observed for the first time in 1807 by the Russian Ferdinand Frederick Reuss, that was a scientist who noticed that the application of constant electric field caused particles dispersed in water to migrate. Okay, the electrophoresis could be used in criminality or in kinship, like parentesco. Okay, for example, if I don't know if somebody is my familiar or not, so we can use like the electrophoresis technique, isolating DNA from that person and isolating DNA from me, and if the DNA matches, we can say that we are familiars. Or for example, in criminality, if in a crime, during the scene of the crime, the criminal leaves some of his hair in the floor, we can take the hair and make electrophoresis, and that could help us to capture him or identify him. The electrophoresis technique is very similar to the PCR technique. The PCR technique was invented by Carey Mullis in 1993. This technique, the PCR technique, is very similar because it isolates DNA, it broke up fragments of DNA and separate molecules of DNA. As we know, in the electrophoresis there are two types of hells. One of those is the polyacrylamide hell and the agarose hell. Okay, the two hells, its function of the two hells is to conduct better the electricity to the DNA to denature them or separate them by the electricity. Okay, as I already said in the introduction of this video, there are four kinds of electrophoresis that I will talk about them. The first one is the RGE, that is rotation held electrophoresis. Okay, this technique uses the agarose hell, not the polyacrylamide, the agarose, and we can put the DNA in a tube, and the tube it's rotating all the time, and that makes that the very big fragments of DNA comes down the tube and the small fragments of DNA comes up the tube. Okay, so the fragments of DNA are separated by size. Okay, the second one technique of electrophoresis is called pulse field held electrophoresis. This one is the Fiji technique, and it is very similar to the rotation held electrophoresis technique, but this technique does not rotate its tube. Just with pressure, the molecules of the fragments of DNA that are bigger than the others come down because the pressure, that's why its name is pulsed field, and this technique use the agarose hell like the RGE technique. Okay, the third one technique of electrophoresis is the TAFE, the transverse alternating field electrophoresis. This technique is very similar to the second one, to the Fiji electrophoresis. Its function and its objective is the same like the other ones. Its function is to separate the molecules of DNA, the nature in them, and in this technique the agarose hell is used, and the bigger molecules of DNA are separated from the smallest one, and that's the objective of this technique: isolate the DNA or separate it. Okay, the fourth and the last technique that I will talk about is the is the page that is different from the other ones, that is different from the TAFE, the FISH and the RGE technique, because in this case the polyacrylamide hell is used. In this case it's not the agarose, but the agarose is the most common in the other ones. In this case it's the polyacrylamide. Okay, in this case the tooth in the page technique rotates itself. The tooth rotates, and that makes that the fragments of DNA that are bigger than the smallest one becomes down, and the smallest one that are minus density becomes up, and that's the purpose of this technique. As a conclusion, I can say that all the techniques are very similar. The only changes that I can find is that in one technique the tooth rotates itself, and in the techniques the hell not ever is the same. For example, in the page technique the hell is the polyacrylamide hell, and in the other ones are the agarose hell, that is the most common one, as I already said.